Today's stories contain content that may be considered sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com/submit or check the links down below, and of course, thank you for listening. I have a story that actually got me off the dark web altogether. I actually didn't know much about everything. I was aware of what Tor was, all the encryption stuff and whatnot, but I really wasn't very well versed in what exactly made the deep and dark web different from the surface web. Well, I knew the dark web was the illegal stuff, but I was curious how it was able to exist, how things worked, why the cops hadn't taken it down, and so forth and so on. It was a bit of a weird, ignorant view of things, but as time went on and I educated myself, I started to understand how encryption and anonymity worked. Unfortunately, as I learned, I found myself feeling more confident. I started out as just looking at the things, then I started commenting on forums. Then I moved on to actually communicating with the people instead of just making mindless comments. I kind of felt at home in a few of the communities, and it was nice to kind of live amongst a bunch of people all over the world and just talk about random things that had no real bearing on everyday life. It was almost my escape from reality, which isn't something that a lot of people can say. Well, as I quickly learned, the deep web isn't all rainbows and unicorns. Actually, I don't think it's rainbows and unicorns at all. I just got in with decent people. As I was perusing my usual forum, I found a post by someone that I had spoken with a few times, and I thought they were pretty cool. The forum post said something to the effect of, "Message me for an invite to the Red Friday party." I was all about parties, and again, I was pretty comfortable with these people, so I figured it would just be a good time hanging out online with some of the anonymous people from the internet, chatting about nothing in particular. What I got, however, it was not a party. Now, I'm sure you can see where this is going, and I can hear you probably thinking, but OP, red rooms don't really exist. And I can tell you that while they don't exist as an easily accessible node on the dark web, at least one does exist, and it's shared very privately. This Red Friday party was set up to look like a basic live stream. A camera, some dimmed out red lights, and a girl that was in front of said camera. She looked fairly normal. She didn't look upset or terrified or anything, and she was reading the chat pretty nonchalantly. At first, I thought this was going to be one of those just chatting streams or whatever. People were asking her questions about herself, and she would answer shyly. Most of the questions were pretty normal. A few were a bit sexual and direct, but she pretty much just avoided them. After watching her describe her everyday life for a few minutes, I noticed a timer on top of the screen that was counting down, and was a couple minutes away from 0. I sat there and waited for it to count down, and when it did, there was a ringing noise, and a guy's voice came on from off-screen. He said something to the effect of, "Alright, chat time is up. Now we will go into donation requests only. Get your coins ready because it's going to be a blast." I could see the look on her face shift from shy to straight up nervous. She said something like, I don't think I want to do this." And the other voice very firmly and very loudly said, "You stole from me, and these guys are going to pay your debt. You do what they say until we're square. or things are going to go south really fast. You know the saying, it's like a train wreck, you can't look away? And that's how this was with me. I wanted to close this out and never think about it ever again, but part of me had to watch. The whole thing started pretty mundane. People donated small amounts of Bitcoin for stupid things. Put a shoe on your head, show us your feet, try to lick your elbow. Honestly, really stupid stuff. It wasn't that bad for the first few minutes. But then the higher amounts started to pour in for other things. They were telling her to take her clothes off, do things that I won't mention here. She was visibly distraught the whole time, but she complied. As bad as it was, I really didn't expect the next part. One person chimed in with 2 whole Bitcoin, which was a lot of money at the time, and told her to cut her cheek with a knife. She shook her head no and said that she couldn't do that, but the man chimed in again, said to do it, and handed her a small pocket knife. She started to sob and quickly sliced her cheek, causing herself to bleed. And then there was another donation for several more Bitcoin that said, cut off a finger. She was already sobbing at this point and screaming no, saying that she was done, that she wanted to leave. Then he started yelling at her, grabbed her hand, and did it for her. This was mortifying, obviously, but the last part got worse. There were people starting to donate dozens of Bitcoin to this stream, and the things they wanted were sick. Then, one person chimed in with a 50 Bitcoin donation that said, I'm bored. Get rid of her. This was then matched by a number of other people donating similar amounts and echoing the same sentiment. I just sat there for a moment, watching her scream and cry, begging for her life, and then watched a man walk onto the scene of the camera with what looked like a machete. I did not continue watching. I will say that the thought of all this made me physically ill. I literally threw up in the trash can by my desk. That was the worst thing I had ever seen, and it completely made me swear off anything beyond the surface web. Hell, since then, I've been nearly scared to use a computer and do anything beyond Facebook or surf the front page of Reddit. I have no idea if what I saw was real or a pre-recorded snuff-like horror movie, but it may have been a legit Red Room-style party. I don't know if the chat was real or pre-recorded, but part of me tells me that she was being held hostage, and what I saw actually happened. While Red Rooms may not really be a big thing like the movies make them out to be, something akin to them does exist, and I highly recommend never, ever going to a dark web livestream, just in case. I have an interesting dark web story from a perspective that most people don't get. Namely, from the perspective of someone that used to actually work for an associate of a site that was kind of like Silk Road. Nowadays, I do work for a company that contracts out cybersecurity stuff, mostly penetration testing and threat hunting. It's fun. I like working on the safe side of things, doing work for the man, and getting paid to break things for them. And I will never go back to the dark side of things, especially after what happened. I'm not trying to hype this up. What happened was absolutely horrifying, but it is the truth. And it's what happens when mistakes are made working with criminals. So, like I said, I used to work with a couple guys that did dark web style business, mostly selling illegal stuff, like drugs, and mostly drugs. In fact, Yeah, it's best to say that we just sold a lot of substances to people that couldn't or wouldn't get a prescription for a premium. We had a lot of customers, and most of them were repeat customers, and we had a very well encrypted list of everyone that we had ever worked with in the past, including their regular orders. And we had a very well constructed method of shipping. We would ship the items in boxes that looked like they were from other companies, and we would hide the good stuff with the other stuff in ways that made it unlikely to be found. This was also a long time ago, back before Silk Road was actually busted. So, people weren't really looking for substances like that in the mail. My part of this operation was actually system security. I was in charge of keeping the site running and making sure that no one ever got the information that we held, including who was in the operation and the list of customers. I was good at my job. We never got hit by a honeypot operative. I was good at sniffing out cops that were trying to do purchases, and we never had any security or downtime issues. I also kept the overall site looking clean, which may not be something that really means anything, but to me, we had the nicest looking dark web market that ever existed. I was actually quite proud of the work that I had done on it. Now that you know me, the operation, the site, and all that stuff, let's talk about the part of it that became problematic. A man that we will simply call Rob. Rob was the ringleader of the whole thing, and we knew that he was in charge. Hell, most of us just accepted that it was his business, and as long as we got paid, we didn't really care what went on. Rob was the business major that had decided working doing illegal stuff was the best way to pay back the money that he owed on his student loans. And, I will say, he was a bit cocky when it came to doing the work that he did. He was actually arrested at one point on unrelated charges, and we thought we were going to be next, seeing as how he liked to talk. Thankfully, nothing happened, and he was let go. He said it was because he had a good lawyer, but I don't know. Anyways, let's talk about the situation that actually happened. As I said, we all ran a little business on the dark web selling illegal substances. Things went smoothly, and everybody was happy. That is, until they didn't, and nobody was happy. Despite all the minor hiccups that did happen, it wasn't a huge deal until we had one specific customer that was very displeased with our services. We are going to call this customer Chris. Chris had a drug addiction, and Chris was probably our most frequent customer. Also, Chris was a very aggressive person when it came to communications. I know what you're thinking. Why are you in frequent communications with a customer if you're selling illegal items on the dark web? Unfortunately, it was Chris that was in communications with us. There was always something wrong with his order. Now, I wasn't involved in getting the content, the shipping, or the business side of things, so I just kind of ignored the situation. I ran the back-end servers, which included our messaging system, so I saw all the communications that went on. Unfortunately, Rob, being the hard-headed jerk that he was, liked to antagonize Chris when he was being irrational. He would message him saying that he was an idiot, to never purchase from us ever again, things like that. The last time this all went down, Chris messaged back saying that if we didn't get his order right, he was going to go to the cops. Now, there are a handful of things you don't do when you're dealing with people on the dark web, and one of them is to threaten contacting the police and shutting down a lucrative operation. When this message came through, Rob sent out a correspondence to all of us that this customer was to be blacklisted, and that he would be contacting people within other markets to make sure he was never sold to again. The problem is, Rob also sent this to Chris as, well, my guess was that it was to send some kind of message, like, you mess with us, I cut you off. While there are things you don't do to those that operate dark web businesses, there are also things you don't do to irate and irrational drug addicts that know how to use the dark web. The situation went from unsavory to an absolute hellstorm. At the time of all this happening, I was actually staying with Rob for a few days due to some personal issues at home. He had turned the back half of his basement into a bit of a spare room and server closet, so I was lucky enough to sleep where my work was. Anyways, I was actually downstairs working on something irrelevant to the situation when I heard what sounded like somebody kicking in a door. I immediately ran up to the top of the stairs, but I stopped in the doorway to see what the hell was going on. There, I see a 6-foot-something guy that had to be somewhat north of 300 pounds standing in the doorway with what looked like a shotgun in his hands. And Rob on his knees, literally begging this guy not to kill him. I heard Rob call this guy Chris, which told me all I needed to know. This wasn't going to end well, and I was likely going to be next. I stepped quickly down the stairs as quietly as I could and went down into the area beneath the steps, basically behind the server closet. Then, I dialed 911 on my burner phone. When they answered, I just told them the address and said that I needed officers immediately because there was a man with a gun that had just broken in, and then I hung up. I didn't want to give them any of my information since, I'm kind of a criminal. No more than a few seconds after I hung up, I heard screaming and a gunshot. I knew what that meant. I waited there until I was certain that he had left, and then I did the most cowardly thing that I could. I climbed my way up and out of the basement window with my backpack and walked calmly to the McDonald's that was pretty much across the street, so I could see what played out. The cops showed up, then the ambulance, and then the coroner and the crime scene guys. I listened to the police radio to see if they ever caught the guy. There was some crosstalk about the situation, but in the end, they jumped to encrypted channels and I lost track of what they were doing. My stay at Rob's house was a very temporary thing, and I had most of my life in my backpack, so I wasn't overly worried about them knowing I was there. I did go into cleanup mode with the servers, though. They were nuked entirely, so no information was ever pulled. It was a pretty messed up situation, and I really did feel bad for what happened to Rob, but in the end, if you're going to work as a criminal, you have to be ready to face the consequences of being a criminal. Did he deserve to die? No, absolutely not, but that's not how Chris saw it. So, my final suggestion, just avoid the dark web. Deep web stuff is fine, it's pretty safe, but do not go down that rabbit hole because sometimes what you find on the other end may be unpredictable. I used to be one of those people that liked to go on the deep web for the fun of it, and I would frequent a number of underground-style sites. I work in the IT industry, and for some reason the deep web and dark web are these strangely taboo things that we aren't supposed to discuss with normal people. But it's not exactly like it's the best-kept secret. Those of us that do go out on tour and look at things that are, at their best, questionable, well, it's almost like we can smell it on other users. We all have this weird sixth sense that can tell if the person next to us is one that peruses the deep. Okay, not really, but typically we can tell by your demeanor if you are someone that knows what they're talking about, and most of the time something about the deep web will come up. Now, I'm the kind of person that knows what they're talking about. Probably a bit too well. Let me put it this way. If it was something that was shady, sketchy, unsavory, or otherwise an illegally gray area, I was probably spending some time each and every day looking at it to see what was what. I spent more than my fair share of time on a few deep web community boards, mostly chatting it up with like-minded people that also had way too much spare time on their hands. My favorite pastimes were posting on conspiracy boards. It's crazy what people will say when there's no limit or filter, and honestly, some of the things that they say out there may be more true than we like to believe. Case in point, hitmen sites totally exist and are more than likely legitimate businesses. Well, the ones that aren't honeypots anyway. Aside from that, there are a lot of marketplaces that exist on the deep web for things that are questionable. But the dark web? Now that's where things turn to the downright illegal. I will admit to having spent my fair share of time and money on dark web markets. I have bought things that are illegal to own, and I have seen things that I shouldn't have seen, and things that I definitely did not want to see. That said, I wanted to write this quick story about one of the marketplaces that actually kind of freaked me out, and made me pull away from the illegal stuff. There was a particular marketplace that existed that touted itself as the be-all and end-all of dark web markets. And it was essentially this massive dark web version of Craigslist or Facebook market. If you were looking for something that you shouldn't have been, and were willing to spend some Bitcoin, well, then you were in luck, because odds are, they had it. Bootleg movies? Check. Viagra from another country? Check. Computers potentially stolen from a government facility? Somehow? Check. However, it got a bit deeper than that. They also had services that you could pay for. Nothing like those hitmen sites at all, but if you wanted to, quote-unquote, have a good time with someone who might be about to die, then you could. Hey, I don't judge others for what they do behind closed doors. I keep my opinions to myself and just live my life. You do you. That said, I actually stumbled onto something that I initially thought, there's no way that's real. Until I messaged the seller, and then, well, I'm not so sure anymore. It could have been a honeypot or a Fed trap or something, but if so, it was a damn good one. I was perusing the market one afternoon, looking for something stupid, I think. I was looking for shoes or something, don't ask, when I stumbled upon something that was simply labeled new. I like new things, so I eagerly clicked it and went on to read what was so interesting about this new product. Well, this new product wasn't really a product. The description read something like, and I am paraphrasing here, I have access to any age up to 7, and I can deliver. Forged paperwork extra, must have payment ready for any and all offers. Obviously, my first thought was that this was a full-on honeypot or a scam for people that were looking for children, which would be a fairly niche scam if you think about it. So I mentally defaulted it to a honeypot, and because I was a bit of an edgy 20-something, I decided I would message the seller and mess with them a bit. I logged into my account on the market, and I went to the user to send them a message. I asked something along the lines of, how do we know you're legitimate and not a Fed trying to arrest someone? They responded with, you don't, which kind of solidified the honeypot idea that I had in mind already. I responded with, Can you prove that you're legitimate? I have the Bitcoin ready if you're an actual seller. Again, I was just trying to goad this person into giving me anything that would confirm my personal bias. They sent me a message back saying, boy or girl, and how old. I had to think on this one for a second. I wanted to give him something that may be tough to respond with, so I said, boy, around 5. He then asked me for my name. He sent back some pictures of a little boy that looked to be around 4 or 5 years old. In the pictures, the boy looked pretty happy. He was in a basement area, playing with toys, and there was one of him watching SpongeBob on TV. I was actually getting a bit nauseous with this whole thing, so I responded back saying, is he the one that's for sale? At this point, I felt like I needed to gather as much information as I possibly could to maybe take to the authorities. The seller responded with, he's one of them, yes. I then asked him to prove that he didn't just send me a picture of his own kid to try and bait me. He, once again, asked me for my name, which was something I had tried to avoid answering prior. I was a bit nervous at first, for obvious reasons. So, I just told him my name was Marcus. It's not, but you don't tell people on the dark web your real name. After I told him my name, I hadn't gotten a response back for about an hour, and I was almost certain that he was a Fed that was now tracking me at this point. That is, until he finally did respond. I got a message back from him with an MP4 attached to it, and in the video was the boy playing with a couple Hot Wheels. In the video, you could hear a man talking, and I'm assuming that was the seller. The man asked what the boy's name was. The boy said Tony. Then the man asked who was filming him. The boy said Uncle Will. Then the man said, and who's the video for? The boy then said, it's for Uncle Marcus. He then said, and why are we making this video? The little boy laughed and then responded with, to find me a new mommy and daddy. There was a bit more back and forth to prove that this kid was legitimate, and to show that the seller wasn't messing around. He then ended the video with, now that you can see that little Tony here is very real and in need of a good living home, let's talk payment. I prefer Bitcoin, but I'll take any of the current stable coins if you have them. I'll be waiting for your response. You'd better believe that I took that information and video straight to the authorities in the form of an anonymous communication. I know, I'm a bit of a coward, but when you're a criminal taking down bigger criminals, it's best not to put your name on anything. I don't know what happened to the case. I'm assuming they passed it on to the FBI division that handles this stuff, but I haven't been hunted down and arrested, nor have I been killed yet, so I guess things are going smoothly. And, unfortunately, this should serve as proof that, yes, you can literally buy anything off the dark web. I have a fairly short story about a personal experience I had on the dark web, and honestly, it was actually more so a weird story than a creepy one. There's absolutely a creepy aspect to it, no doubt about that, but for the most part, it was pretty much just one of those things that you look at, get curious about, and then move on with your life from there. Well, that's what I did, anyway. So, obviously, I'm a deep web user. I like to hit up a bunch of random pages that exist out there. Some are pretty tame. Some of them could probably coexist alongside pages like Twitter. But I also like to spend some of my time on sites that a lot of people would consider to be detestable. Or some other random adjective like that. No, I don't really spend time on illegal or gross things or any content like that, but I like what I like, and really it's just a few pages that may be morally in a gray area. No, I'm not going to name the pages. I'm just going to say that I am an adult and I can do what I want. Just leave it at that. I'm trying to over-justify this, and I shouldn't. One of the pages I like to go on is a bit of a marketplace where you can buy odds and ends, and even the occasional oddity. There have been a lot of things that I wanted to spend money on, but then couldn't justify. Things like vials of blood from certain celebrities that are into Scientology, various bootleg DVDs of early cuts of movies. There was even a book one time that was supposedly signed by Charles Manson. Now, it was a certain book that I wouldn't be caught dead owning, so as cool as having Manson's signature would have been to me, I just kind of moved on and accepted that it was something I would never own. Now, as most of you know, there is a certain niche on the dark web for illegal items. Things like the aforementioned bootleg DVDs, stolen movie scripts, drugs, of course. There's a lot that you can buy on the dark web that you really shouldn't. One thing you don't usually expect to find are accessories. Like, personal accessories. There was one page on the market that I found that sold things like wallets, shoes, watches, etc., and they had what they stated to be exotic leathers available. My curiosity definitely got its grip on me, and I started looking through their wares, and I was shocked at what they claimed to have. The first thing I saw was a ton of leather made of alligator skin. Not terribly crazy. There's certainly a market that exists on the surface for it. Then I clicked through, and they claimed to have camel leather shoes, which I thought was kind of cool, but again, not terribly weird if you live in a place where camels are common. Then I saw some of the weird stuff. Dog leather wallets. It actually started to make me feel a bit thinking of someone's pet being turned into an accessory. And then I saw dolphin leather, and that, I'm pretty sure, is illegal. So, yeah. But then, finally, there was a small section on the store dedicated to human leather. You read that right. Leather made of human skin. They promised that it was durable and that it was well worth the extra money it would cost to source it. There was even a customization section where you could choose the ethnicity of the product if you wanted to change it up. Again, my imagination kind of took over, and I started thinking about who the hell was buying this stuff. But with the process they would have to go through, with the amount of money they were charging, there had to be a market for it, right? Anyways, like I said, that's my story. I know it was short and a bit weirder more than creepy, but it's actually pretty sickening that it exists. And honestly, I think I'll stick with my crappy pleather and Velcro wallet. So this was today's collection of dark web horror stories, the 7th of its kind. It's been quite a while since I've done these stories. They are very, very difficult to source, very difficult to find ones that are good and aren't just creepypastas on No Sleep or something. But yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed this. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. It means the world to me if you guys would do that. It really helps the channel. Also subscribe if you're new. If you're not new, welcome back. Always happy to have a repeat customer. And if you would really be so kind to do so, leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to support the channel further, for just $1 a month, you can get early access to all content like this. Or more. There's more stuff to get access to, which is kind of neat. I don't know. I got some good stuff on my Patreon. You can check that, or hit join down below. Your choice. Always optional, never expected, always appreciated. And that said, my friends, I hope you're having a great November. I hope I will see you on the next video. But until that moment arrives, I hope that you sleep well.